Honestly, I was ready to do a big celebration myself alongside Goku, but after watching that fourth quarter, oh my goodness, I was beyond frustrated. I was sweating bullets in that fourth quarter, but we're gonna get to that later in this video because right now, ultimately, I am relieved. The first round is over. The Warriors have taken care of the Houston Rockets. Hell of a series. There was a lot of good and a lot of bad in this game. Just all kinds of risks taken. Starting with, of course, that starting unit. Ultimately, I thought both coaches made multiple mistakes in this game. But honestly, I was at peace at that point with the fact that Steve Kerr was willing to die on the hill of a three-guard lineup with Buddy Hield and Potts in there next to Steph Curry instead of fortifying the defense. But here's the thing about defense. When Draymond Green shows up the way he did to start that first quarter, and he's essentially just a one-man wrecking crew at that center spot, well, that certainly helps the situation. And as you know, when Steve Kerr overly relies on Buddy Hield, I usually call that Russian roulette. And basically, I was praying that the Warriors would hit the jackpot, because when you play Russian roulette, you can win big. And talk about winning big, Buddy Hield was off the charts in that first half. A lot of open standstill shots, and Buddy was pretty much hitting all of them. And not only did the Warriors get the good version of Buddy Hield, and obviously the good version of Buddy Hield is always when he's hitting his shots to start a game. This, I would say, easily is Buddy Hield's greatest game of his career. Easily. The magnitude of the game, the opportunity to start in a Game 7 situation. The guy has never been in the playoffs up until last year. And he pretty much played minimally for the 76ers. And in the biggest game of his life, the biggest opportunity of his life, Buddy Hield was calm, collected, and actually carried the Warriors in terms of scoring. He had 22 points at the half and ultimately ended up with 33 points. More than the importance of being right or wrong, I just wanted the Warriors to get this win because Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, these guys, the amount of heart and effort they put into the season, they deserve to go beyond the first round, getting booted out by Dillon Brooks and company. So whoever would end up playing in this game, I wanted every single one of those guys to do well. And the thing about Buddy Hield is that when he's playing really well on the offensive end of the floor, usually he shows up on the defensive end of the floor as well. He even hit a ridiculous almost half-court heave to end the first quarter. And it really helped keep the Warriors afloat despite the fact that Steph Curry got off to a really slow start. But again, the story of that first quarter was Draymond's incredible defense, actually two-way play from Draymond. He actually scored 8 of the team's first 13 points. And it's a complete outlier, and this is the kind of stuff that happens once a blue moon Draymond gets going very early. Guys like Potts and Moody get going early. In this case, it would be a combination of Potts and Buddy Hield got it going early and often. And when they run these lineups, they're so reliant on these supplementary pieces to get going, because if they don't get going, then they're in trouble. And as we all know, relying on a bunch of Draymond shots, Potts' shots, Moody shots, Buddy Hield shots, these are risky things. Which is why, as you guys know, I generally don't want the Warriors playing this way. I want them to fortify their defense. And we'll get to the defensive portion of it because Steve Kerr did make some adjustments when it comes to guys that are in rotation. Mainly it's Kevon Looney being prioritized instead of Quinton Post. And with the combination of Draymond playing like a superhuman to start out that first quarter, and then Kevon Looney coming into the game and continuing to connect their defense the way it needs to be connected, the Rockets had nothing going. They actually scored 39 points in that first half. But yes, the Warriors ended up scoring 23 points in that first quarter, and it was mostly Buddy Hield and Draymond Green. And thank the heavens that they were able to come through in that manner. But you can see why that doesn't necessarily sound like a viable idea to go ahead and rely on with everything on the line for the Warriors this season. If you like the content, of course, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and hit that like button so that this video gets out to all the basketball fans out there. So in that first quarter, Steph Curry could not buy a bucket. He started the game 0 for 4 from the field, but he was doing everything else. His defense was awesome. His presence, his gravity, his playmaking, his rebounding, all of these things were super on point, which is why he led the team in plus minus despite the fact that he wasn't really going from the standpoint of scoring himself. And we've seen Steph Curry get off to slow starts in the playoffs. We've seen it against this very Rockets team where he scored 0 points in the first half and then would go on to score like 31, 33 points in the second half. And when you look at the totality of the things that Steph Curry was able to do in this game, especially on the defensive end of the floor. You hear so many people in the media, fans in general, talk about Steph Curry is not a good defender. Oh, he has to be hidden on the defensive end of the floor, all this stuff. And you watch the things that he did in this game, and the defense was simply majestic. The guy had 10 rebounds. He led the Warriors in rebounds. The smallest guy on the court, 37 years old. He has no business being this good on the defensive end of the floor. Usually, as players get older, their defense gets worse. That is part of the reason why star players eventually end up coming off the bench before their career fizzles out, because their defense is not good enough. You look at a guy like Allen Iverson is literally the perfect example. He could still score with the best of them, but eventually the defense diminishes. And with Steph Curry, that just hasn't been the case. Leading the team in rebounds against this giant Rockets team, 10 rebounds? What has been the Warriors' biggest issue against this giant Rockets team? Rebounding! And Steph was everywhere, all over the place. 2 steals, 2 blocks, and these numbers don't do him justice when it comes to the possession by possession ability, stopping whoever is in front of him. No matter the speed, no matter the size, he's keeping you in front of him. And he's either shutting you down or forcing you into a very difficult shot. The grittiness, the toughness, and the defensive capability of Steph Curry will forever be underappreciated. But a giant part of the reason why the Warriors have won multiple championships, with Steph Curry being the best player on the team, is because unlike other players where they're the smallest guy on the floor and they can't take their team to the promised land because their defense is not good enough, and the other team will inevitably take advantage of that fact, target that guy, abuse that guy, whatever the case may be, and those differences ultimately shape up to be the difference between wins and losses in the playoffs. If Steph Curry's defense was not good enough, if Steph Curry's defense was something like, I don't know, Dame Lillard or something, the Warriors are not the team that they have been in the Steph Curry era. And all I can say is to appreciate him, because he is truly once in a lifetime. And despite the fact that he was 0 for 6 in this game at one point, he ended up shooting 8 of 16 from the field. 7 assists, 2 turnovers, a complete stat line. And when it mattered the most in the fourth quarter, he showed up big. And Jimmy Butler was his usual steady, reliable self. 20 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 turnover, just efficient across the board. All of these guys played a ton of minutes. Steph Curry, 46 minutes. Jimmy Butler, 45 minutes. I mean, Jimmy Butler, 35 years old. Steph Curry, 37 years old. These guys don't make any sense in terms of the production that they provide despite being their age. And again, the job that Draymond was able to do protecting that paint. You know, part of the inconsistencies of the Warriors going really small is that they're overly relying on Draymond to do everything, to anchor the defense, guard the best bigs, and being asked to rebound over everybody in a tiny lineup at the same time. These are very difficult things to ask of him. This guy is also 35 years old, and yet he was just unbelievable in this game. Again, also for Draymond, two-way play. They got two-way play from all 3 of their key guys. And again, regardless of the deficiencies of Steve Kerr's decision making, I just wanted to see these guys get rewarded for all the work that they put in. They truly deserve this, and they don't have a lot of time to rest. There's a game 1 coming up in a couple of days against the Timberwolves. And I appreciate the fact that I get to watch them for another series and probably be very frustrated game by game, because now we can get into the nuances of what went wrong in this game. Now, just like the Rockets have been doing to the Warriors threw a ton of zone defense, a bunch of 3-2 zones and 2-3 zones, 2-1-2 zones, all kinds of zones. And a lot of it was very purposeful. The zone needs to make sense and the players need to be able to shift very quickly from here to here. And the Rockets never truly got going in this game until that third quarter. And that's the thing. In that first half, the small lineups and all these things, it was working because Buddy Hield was playing amazing and out of this world. And again, Draymond was playing out of this world. And then Kevon Looney came in and connected their defense. Meanwhile, Jonathan Kuminga also came into this game. Steve Kerr actually kept his promise of trying Jonathan Kuminga in a do-or-die game. And very unfortunately, Kuminga showed who he is in this game. Defensively, essentially a non-impact. I mean, there's one particular sequence where he just throws the ball away. It's just absolutely senseless in a Game 7 situation. And then on the defensive end of the floor, he's literally just standing like this, like a cone, not trying to stop anybody, not trying to put a body on anybody. And at the end of the day, man, Jonathan Kuminga has proven himself to be an amateurish player. And I know there's a lot of Kuminga fans out there, and under different circumstances, under a different system, and not a team trying to contend for anything, Kuminga can be a player who produces a lot of numbers on a different team. But we all have to come to the realization that it takes a lot more than just those scoring opportunities for a player to be viable to contend in the playoffs with. And you can say that he hasn't played enough, he's out of rhythm, and all these things, and those things are probably true too. And that's more of the reason why he should not have been in this game. So after that first quarter, Kuminga should not have seen any time for the rest of this game. And yet in the second half, Steve Kerr brought him back into the fire in that third quarter. And once again, it just looked absolutely awful and they had to sit him. And Kerr was really gambling in that third quarter. He brought in Kevon Looney alongside Jonathan Kuminga, which helps Kuminga and which helps the Warriors' overall defense. But once things were not looking good with Kuminga in there, Steve decided to not only take out Kuminga, but he also took out Looney out of the equation. And it's a complete gamble. You're going small, and the Rockets were beating the Warriors in that third quarter. Again, even though in that first quarter, Draymond was Herculean, you just can't expect him to do that throughout the course of the entire game. And in that third quarter, it showed. The Rockets were outplaying the Warriors. And the Warriors couldn't get anything on either end of the floor, on both ends of the floor. 19 points scored in that third quarter. But towards the end of the third quarter, Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler just put on their capes, and despite the fact that their early lead, that early first half lead, dwindled down to like a 3-point lead, yes, the Rockets were able to essentially erase all that work that the Warriors were able to do in that first half, all the stuff that Buddy Hield provided, all of that for naught. Everything was getting erased once again, and the game was in jeopardy. And yet Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler just somehow, some way or another, willed their way to stops and scoring just enough to go into that fourth quarter with an 8-point lead. And then Steve Kerr in that fourth quarter starts out with a Draymond and Kevon Looney lineup. And that was protecting that 3-guard lineup of Steph Curry, Potts, and Buddy Hield. And with that, the Warriors were playing great defense, and Steph Curry scored the first 5 points in that fourth quarter to get going. And once again, the Warriors were able to build a 13-point lead. Huge! At that point, I am thinking as long as Steve Kerr is sticking with the Draymond and Looney combination and then fortifies it even more and getting away from that 3-guard lineup, the Warriors are definitely going to win this game because they have a 13-point lead. All they have to do is protect it with defense, more defense-leaning lineups. They do not need so much offense anymore now that they have this cushion. So just about 2.5 minutes had gone by in that fourth quarter, and then Steve Kerr signals Jimmy Butler to come back into the game. And at that juncture, I am praying that Steve is taking out Pods for Jimmy Butler so that the Warriors could run a lineup of Steph Curry, Buddy Hield, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, and Looney, and that would do more than enough to make sure that they are good enough defensively, regardless of big lineups that the Rockets would put out there. They had enough size of their own, the Warriors did, and obviously offensively, they could easily rely on Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and in tonight's game, Buddy Hield. That would be more than good enough for the Warriors to not risk this game. Instead, Steve took out Looney, brought back Jimmy Butler, and they're closing with this all-small lineup of Steph Curry, Pods, Buddy Hield, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond. And then the Rockets would go on to score 6 straight points of their own, negating the early 5 points that Steph Curry ended up scoring. Curry would go on to score 9 of the first 12 points in that fourth quarter. But from there, the Rockets went back to their routine of top-locking Steph Curry, and Steve Kerr simply lived with the fact that the Warriors were playing 4-on-4 with Steph Curry out of the equation, and he's just relying on a bunch of Pods and Draymond last-second shots. And for the next 3.5 hellish minutes, the Warriors would fail to score. They can't get anything going. It is literally Pods taking open shots all day and night, and he's not able to get anything. Draymond is throwing up heaves with the shot clock running out, and they're getting absolutely nothing. The offense is an utter disaster. Remember, you're going small because you think you have an advantage offensively, and you're not scoring for almost a 4-minute stretch in the fourth quarter of Game 7? You gotta be kidding me. So eventually, the Rockets would score just enough. Dillon Brooks got a tough shot in because the Warriors had to double down when Pods was stuck on an island against Changun. These things should never happen when you're trying to close a game with a lead. It just shouldn't. And at that point, with just under 5 minutes left in the game, Dillon Brooks hits that tough shot, and it's an 8-point game. And I have just seen this movie too many times where the Warriors are going too small, and they end up blowing the lead and end up losing a game that they shouldn't lose. But again, Steph Curry's defense was simply unreal in that fourth quarter. Jimmy Butler, Draymond, all these guys came through in an unbelievable way. And then there was And then there was a play where the Warriors got a stop and they got out in transition, and it was Jimmy Butler and Buddy Hield, and Fred VanVleet has a meltdown and foolishly pushes Jimmy Butler for a clear path foul, allowing 2 free throws to Jimmy Butler and the possession back to the Warriors. Before you know it, Jimmy Butler hits 2 free throws, and on the ensuing possession, Jimmy Butler ends up hitting a mid-range shot. That's a 4-point play, and now the Warriors have a 14-point lead, and the Rockets just fall apart from there. And ultimately, I guess you could say that this was the inexperience of the Rockets. Some of those guys were simply too young. Jalen Green showed absolutely nothing in this game. To be honest with you, he played like a 6-man this entire series. He had like 1 good game. And Ime Udoka ultimately was very wishy-washy with Steven Adams. Honestly, if I'm Ime Udoka, I'm starting Steven Adams. And I'm benching Jalen Green. He's coming off the bench and he's playing a 6-man role in this game. And they're going to play through Alperen Şengün, Fred VanVleet behind a forceful large unit, and Ime Udoka ultimately died on the hill of Jalen Green. And me on the side of the Warriors, I can only be grateful. But yes, ultimately after that 4-point play by Jimmy Butler, the Rockets completely wilted and melted apart. Right after that 4-point play, Steph Curry goes down, hits a 3-point shot. Now it's a 17-point lead for the Warriors. It happened in the blink of an eye, guys. It was a really close game, and then that clear path foul just really destroyed the Rockets' momentum, and that was the end of the game. From there, the Warriors had all the momentum, and well, Buddy Hield picked up a lot of garbage points at the end of the game there, because in that third quarter, Buddy Hield did not score a single point after scoring 22 points in that first half. But in the final 2 minutes of the game or so, when the game was already in hand, Buddy would go on to score 8 more points, and ultimately that's how he ended up with 33 points, a season high for him. But yes, the fact that Steve Kerr would risk the game the way he did to close and go with a tiny unit when he had a big lead that he could have protected with a more defensive oriented lineup, nobody can tell me that their defense is better when they go with a 3-guard lineup with Jimmy Butler and Draymond to close the game instead of Jimmy Butler, Draymond, and Kevon Looney in there and being able to shut the paint off. If the Warriors weren't playing such an inexperienced team, this game could have turned out very, very different. Ultimately, I think the greatness of Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, and in tonight's case, I will give all the credit in the world to Buddy Hield. These 4 guys essentially carried the Warriors to a victory in this game. And through their greatness, they were simply able to overcome all the deficits that were being created from a fundamental standpoint. It took a 7-game series against this inexperienced Rockets team when it really could have ended in 5. And I'm very curious what else has to happen to this team for Steve Kerr to continue to learn various lessons so that he can fix up enough in time for this team to look like the best version of itself. Hopefully they finally learn that Jonathan Kuminga does not belong in the playoffs. The Jonathan Kuminga era for the Warriors is essentially over. By the way, Quinton Post got a couple of minutes in that second quarter. Steve Kerr started that second quarter with his typical Jimmy Butler-centric lineup where Quinton Post is included in there. And those are the spot minutes that I was talking about when it comes to Post. You can give him some spot minutes and see how he does. And in this case, they didn't stick Quinton Post on Steven Adams exclusively. They used him in a zone scenario. You can see in this particular matchup, it would be Draymond guarding Steven Adams, and Quinton Post would just have to recover on a shooter like Jabari Smith in the corner. But ultimately, Post couldn't really do anything very useful on the floor, so 3 minutes is all he saw in this game, and that was a really good adjustment by Steve Kerr to go with a majority of the center minutes through Kevon Looney, the guy who's been there, done that, and understands the know-hows and the importance of defense. Kevon Looney wanted to play 11 minutes in this game. It should have been more. He really should have closed the bulk of that fourth quarter, but again, the Warriors were able to get away with it. I just don't understand Steve's obsession with the need and the desire to close the game with Potts. What was Potts doing out there? Defensively, was he doing anything out there? No, he was causing disadvantages and breaking up the Warriors defense because he's too small and he's stuck on an island against these bigger guys, and then players have to rotate and overly help, and then the Rockets are going to get open looks. And those are things that can't happen to close a game. And is that on Potts? No, it's not his decision to be put on the floor and being put in that situation and position. And man, he couldn't hit the side of a barn tonight. That fourth quarter, him missing those open 3-point shots, oh my goodness, the Warriors are really getting nothing offensively with him on the floor. There is no advantage. And then defensively, you're too small. You're giving all these things up. I just think that no serious coach would gamble the game in that manner. And again, Kerr simply got away with it through the greatness of the players that were on the floor, not because his decisions were helping the team. I think it's an absolute shame that Guy Santos got no minutes in this game and Kuminga ended up getting his minutes instead. Those minutes were very detrimental. Ultimately, Steve essentially played an 8-man rotation with Quinton Post getting spot minutes. And it was certainly important that he was not doing wonky stuff with Steph Curry, not playing him enough, playing him like 40 minutes instead of 46, something like that. And that could have been a huge difference in this game. And offensively, there was too many moments where Steve Kerr is allowing Steph Curry to just settle and just stand outside and do nothing while the team plays 4-on-4, while they overly rely on pods. This stuff is not going to work against the better teams that are coming up. It's just not. You want Steph Curry to get more open looks, get Kevon Looney in there and have him set high screens for Steph. When everybody on the floor is too small, those screens are not going to be effective enough and Steph is simply going to get trapped. And he won't be able to get going consistently enough if you play that way. You have to at some point have a bruiser screener guy, and really the only guy that can do that for the Warriors is Kevon Looney. So set those high screens and do a little DHO so that Steph Curry can get an open look. This has been a staple part of getting Steph Curry going throughout the course of his career in the playoffs. Against the Kings in that Game 7, against the Celtics, these things were utilized. It's like the Warriors have forgotten the existence of a DHO because there are not enough center minutes for this team now. Ultimately, what I can say I learned from this series, especially in this Game 7, is that ultimately we're trying to get to the bottom line of who is the most viable shooting guard next to Steph Curry. And it's really tough to answer because it's between 3 guys. It's Buddy Hield, Potts, and Moses Moody. I suppose it's going to depend on matchups. I suppose it's going to depend on how much more POA they're going to need, or how much overall connectedness they're going to need, or how much more shooting they're going to need. I've said this all along. I'm okay with any of those guys next to Steph Curry as long as they're protected by 3 forwards on the floor at the same time. Another guard being out there is typically redundant and the Warriors can never truly consistently thrive playing this style of basketball. And they narrowly got away with it against the Rockets in the 7th game literally. Does that sound like a sustainable idea or plan to you? It certainly does not to me. When it comes to Kevon Looney playing more minutes than Quinton Post, was this a fundamental change in Steve Kerr or was this an aberration? If he does decide to use Kevon Looney before he does Quinton Post, then the Warriors, Steve Kerr, will have figured out 2 key fundamental things. 1, get Jonathan Kuminga permanently out of the rotation. 2, get Kevon Looney ahead of Quinton Post in the hierarchy of importance for this team. And hopefully in the upcoming series, Steve will be able to recognize that a 3-forward lineup is going to be much more vital than a 3-guard lineup for this team. To be honest with you, the way the Warriors are constructed, if they go with 3 forward units, they would have taken care of the Rockets in 5 games, and I believe they would be able to take care of the Timberwolves in 5 games as well. But the longer it takes for Steve Kerr to learn some of these important fundamental lessons for this team to go further this season, the longer each series will continue to go. The Warriors are not going to be able to finish off the Wolves in 5 games if Steve Kerr continues to gamble on the defensive end of the floor. I'm just glad I don't have to watch dirty-ass Dylan Brooks play the game of basketball anymore. Plenty more to come now, obviously. Big shout out to Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, and Buddy Hield in this game. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.